D. Mace Finnegan and Donick 1025, 1063 The Game. Broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville Studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, and David Janes here with all of you on Wednesday. Derek, David, and I are back in Nashville. Willie Donick, he's in Dallas, where the Predators will take on the Stars tomorrow. Puck drop at 7, pregame at 6. Since Willie Donick is in Big D, can I call him Willie Big D Donick today?
Pause, man. Pause.
Hey, if the shoe fits. If the shoe fits.
Pause. This is a kid's show.
Big D.
Okay, once again,
This is a
people.
kid's show.
Once
Big
again,
D
people.
is a common
Once again, people.
is a common name for the city of Dallas. Willie is a Donick. His last name starts with a D. Willie Big D Donick works for me.
Again, the views of Adam is not the views of the show.
We did not run a disclaimer before the program.
Exactly. They are solely his and his alone.
And maybe Willie too.
I'll leave it
And
to
maybe
Willie.
Willie.
I'll leave it to Willie to decide if he wants to be known as Big D Donick today.
You know, they always say you don't really nickname yourself.
Yeah.
That's not one I would nickname myself, but you know,
You got a
if it
nickname.
catches on,
It's Willie
if it
D.
catches on,
It's
there's not
Willie
much I
D.
can do
No,
about
your
it.
nickname is Will. There it is.
Speaking of big, the Denison Big Red. Willie was not with us yesterday because he had the opportunity to watch his son Mahoney play for the Denison Big Red baseball team. How was it, Willie? How did it go?
Well, I had a great time. It was a beautiful day for an April 1st day in Granville, Ohio. They don't always get great weather at the very beginning of April. It gets really nice as you get a few more weeks in, but it's about 50, 52 degrees, sunny, no wind, so it was very pleasant. I saw them win the first half of the doubleheader. They unfortunately lost the second game of the doubleheader to Wabash College. But it happens. But I saw them get a W, and I got to see Mahoney, and he did not get into the game. So our vibes to try to, will them to put him into the game, it didn't happen. Their ace pitcher pitched a tremendous ball game, and their closer came in and got the job done. But it was great to watch him and see him and see where he goes to school and all that stuff. I've been up there a few times, and when the Predators season's over, I'll probably watch them as they get close to postseason play. They've done very well. They're 17-4. They're ranked in the top, whatever ranking system you look at, they're in the top 10. So they've got a chance to do some great things in the postseason.
You know who doesn't have a great chance of doing great things in the postseason? The Nashville Predators, because they've been eliminated.
I mean, do you have to stick it to me like that? I mean,
man,
I know.
you gotta pull the
It
Band-Aid off.
it
You
was
gotta
a
pull it
good
off. Yeah.
it was a good segue you sent me
Yes,
up
you
there.
lobbed it up, man.
Yeah, you lobbed it up. I slammed it home. So an unintentional alley-oop from Willie Donick. But the Predators have zero chance of doing great things in the postseason because they've been eliminated from postseason contention. That happened last week. But the Predators lost both games of their back-to-back Monday and Tuesday. Monday in Philadelphia, and last night in Columbus by the final score of 8-4. Yes, 8-4. Even the wonderful animated game in the Hockeyverse called by Max Hers and Chris Mason, even that wonderful program could not paint a rosy picture of what's going on with these Nashville Predators. And as the season nears its end, the Nashville Predators have just 7 games remaining in the regular season before the season ends. I'm just going to come out and say it, and I want to hear what everybody else has to say. Willie and Derek, as well as all of you at 615-737-1025. I just can't find a way that the Predators can justify bringing back Andrew Brunette. And I know that there are things working against him right now. The Predators lineup currently could, let's see, what's the word I'm looking for? Could generously be described as a preseason caliber lineup. There are players playing for the Predators right now who may or may not, need to be in the NHL. They are by necessity, but there's only so much I understand that you can do with a lineup that looks the way the Predators lineup looks right now. But as I shared with the both of you before the show, the Predators, who, by the way, have lost 9 of 11, they are 2-8-1 in their past 11 games. So they are doing one thing well. They are losing and putting themselves in position to have, good odds of drafting number 1 overall. They have a .413 points percentage this season. That would be the second worst in franchise history, behind the inaugural team in 1998-1999. And as Willie, you said to us before the show, based on preseason expectations, this is by far the most disappointing season in Predators history. And I know that there are a lot of excellent salespeople who work for the Nashville Predators. It would take a Herculean effort to sell these fans on bringing back this coach after the way this season has gone. So we'll see what happens. We'll talk about what Pierre LeBrun said last week. We'll discuss what we talked about with Elliot Friedman last week. But I'll just start there. I cannot find a way that the Predators can justifiably bring back Andrew Brunette.
Well, you guys know me. I think that's a very easy take from a 10,000, 30,000 foot view. And just like when Pierre LeBrun put out last week that he says that Barry Trotz would have fired Andrew Brunette if he was going to already. And so that means he'll be back next year. I don't think it's clear cut that way either. So I don't think it's clear cut is what I would tell you. I think there's going to be a lot of evaluation that's done after this is all over. It is really hard right now, especially after they lost 2 veterans in Colton Sissons and Jonathan Marchessault. So this road trip going in on back-to-backs with a depleted roster where they only have the minimum amount of skaters. They have no options right now because they've use the call-ups like most of the teams have done. The Flyers are in the same position. For example, I was just asking them, they don't have the flexibility in their roster to call players up because of the rules. They would have to have an emergency. So as long as they have enough healthy players, they have to use those players. So it's hard to win right now. I would not be evaluating Andrew Brunette for anything that happens from here to the end of the season. I would say up until last night. And last night, that was a tough one because Columbus was absolutely desperate. They were rested. Nashville got in late at night after playing the Flyers. They had the depleted roster. They just ran out of gas. And I will say this, that was not a good game for UC Saros. I know he was hung out to dry to an extent, but he should have made he needed to make a few more saves, and maybe they could have hung around a little bit longer. Up until that game, they have been very competitive. The effort has been good. They have not had too many games where they've checked out. And let's be honest, they've been out of the playoff race for a couple of months now. They knew they weren't going to make the playoffs when they went into the Four Nations break. So just keeping them playing hard in some semblance has been, I think, a minor victory for Andrew Brunette. They haven't completely checked out on him. There's going to be some eggs laid. Maybe there'll be another one tomorrow night. I don't know, but I would bet you in the last 8 games or so, there's going to be a couple of games that look like last night where they just don't have it because of the limitations on their roster. But all that having been said, I was listening to Barry's interview yesterday with Jared Stillman. There's so much that they have to sort out. And I understand your point, Adam, that just from you do have to sort of consider what are the fans going to see if you bring back the coach. But that's where Barry Trotz has to make the nuanced decision and decide, is Andrew Brunette the right guy for this group next year, the way they want to play? What's the best way to play with the players that they have? And right now, we don't know who the players are going to be. You have a semblance of it, but what about free agency, trades, and all that stuff? And who do they pick? Because I think they have a very good chance to get a top 3 pick in the draft.
I would agree with you on the idea that this Predators team has not quit on its coach. Now, I am not in the dressing room every day, but I'll always go back to going into the dressing room at the Cotton Bowl at the end of the Winter Classic on New Year's Day 2020. They lose that game to the Stars. You walk in the dressing room at the Cotton Bowl. I remember talking to Pecorine and Roman Yossi and Austin Watson and Matthias Ekholm. And I remember walking out of that room and knowing in my gut, because I was around that team all the time, that Peter Laviolette's days were numbered. I didn't know when he was going to be fired. I didn't know he was going to be fired 5 days later, but I got that vibe. You just have a vibe. And by watching this team from afar, I do not see a team that has given up. To your point, Willie, the roster currently is depleted, and players who probably should not be playing in the NHL right now are playing in the NHL right now. As I said, this lineup can generously be described as a preseason lineup. And even then, I've seen preseason lineups that look more formidable than what this Predators team is putting out on the ice right now. I think you have to look at it big picture. And Willie and I, we like to lift up the hood. We like to dig into the fancy stats. We like to look at the process. And if you were to do that, I think you could see some areas where they have improved over the course of the season. But for general Predators fans, you look at this season, the fact that they made the playoffs last season, the fact that they spent a ton of money in free agency to bring in 3 of the top free agents on the market. And this team is about to miss the playoffs for they are going to miss the playoffs. They are missing the playoffs for the second time in 3 years. So I understand the nuance, Willie, that Barry Trotz has to look at it from a nuanced perspective. But if he does land on the decision to bring back Andrew Brunette, I am going to be fascinated by how this team attempts to sell that to these fans who expected so much more, Derek, of this team.
Yeah, and rightfully so. When you make the moves that you've made in the offseason, you expect a team that's going to be competing at least for a playoff spot. And this team started off on the wrong foot. And in the process, the head coach was trying to figure it out. And it just didn't get to a point where they consistently figured out what was going on. And then in that process, guys started getting hurt. I see this as being it, and I've said this for a while. It's just eerily just like coincidental that both of these franchises tend to go through the same stuff at the same time. It is, I haven't seen this in any other city that I lived in. Like, you got a head coach on one side that potentially they could have fired him this year after the season in Brian Callahan because they got a new GM, but they haven't. But he goes into next season thinking, man, I could potentially get fired in the middle of the season next year. So what do I need to do to make sure that doesn't happen? The GM has already made his decision on who his coach is going to be. It's Brian Callahan for now, but they also said we need some improvement. We need to see some improvement, development, everything else. Then you look at the Nashville Predators. Coach Bruno's going through the same thing. Slightly different in the sense of they essentially went for it essentially last year. And you can't tell me they didn't. Because if you go out and get the firepower you went out and got, that means you are going for more than just a playoff spot. When I said this team needs to be a top 10 team in power play, I meant that. Why? Because of the people they went out and got. Anything less than that is a failure for that season. And that is more than like that's what is going to eventually happen. It just amazes me how both teams, somewhere or another, their paths cross, or their paths, they tend to go on this same path, but in different sports, where, you're questioning the head coach, you're questioning management right now, you're questioning the players that they brought in, and you're doing that, over in Metro Center. You're questioning all those things with the Titans. So I think this offseason again for the Nashville Predators, it's going to be an offseason that they need to get it right. I think they need to get it right. More importantly, first, the head coach. Because if you don't get it right, I think there will be a decision made in the middle of the season somewhere. And then the GM. Because as transparent as he can possibly be, he's been that. He's been up front. That buys you a little time. I think that time is starting to run out. The shine is starting to come off of it. So this offseason, they should try to get as close to number one as they possibly can if they can't get number one. Because whoever they get, it may not change the next following this upcoming season. It may not change things for them, but it gives the fan base hope.
Yeah, it's the good news along that front, that last point, D-Mace.
Mm-hmm.
With some of the action that's happened the last week, Buffalo's won a few games here. The Flyers, who had been slipping, have won 3 in a row since they fired John Tortorella, including win over the Predators. The Predators, I wouldn't say are locked in, but they're pretty close to being locked in at 30th overall. And that does give them some pretty good odds. I think it's 11.5% chance to get the number 1 pick, and they could not fall further than 5. And of course, there's probably the majority chance they would stay at number 3. So with all that said, I think that's the silver lining of having a season like this, is that I believe I did this math correctly. They've only picked in the top 5 of the first round twice in their entire existence. And that's a credit to their winning consistency. I do think, D-Mace, even though they've had some eras that run alongside of the Titans, I think they've had, if you take away the first 5 or 6 years, which was the expansion era, they've been a consistent playoff team. It's easier to make the playoffs in hockey than it is in football. But I think the Titans have picked in the top 5 a lot more than the Predators.
But when I say that, I mean like head coach management, not necessarily the seasons, even though some of their seasons, it seemed like they sort of, if the Titans are doing bad, the Predators are doing bad. Now, like you said, the Predators have been
the last few years, I think, have been eerily similar. You're right.
And that's what I'm saying. And I'm just looking at the last couple of years. It just seems like, to me, that's how I run. But more importantly, it's head coach, GM, coaching staff, stuff like that, that it seems like, they are making changes almost simultaneously. And a fan base is sort of looking at these teams alike in a sense of the GM, head coach, who goes first in both scenarios, because both teams have, they're not looking good right now. So if they have another bad season, which one of these coaches? Because I guarantee you, come next season, Callahan and Coach Bruno will be at the top of the list of guys on a hot seat.
Yeah, I think
in their respective
you're
sports.
Absolutely right. I think you're absolutely right. If they were to bring Andrew Brunette back, and I don't think that's a certainty, I do think he would be among, odds makers do that, right? Who's on the hot seat? Who's the odds of the first guy that's going to go down? They do it. You have no control over that. That's just, they put it out there, whether you like it or not. And I would be sure that Andrew Brunette would be in the top 5 in that category if they brought him back. And so Adam's point is well taken, that it might be a tough sell to bring him back. But that being said, you've put all this groundwork and all this work into adjusting the system to the players that you have, and you would have to maybe start from scratch if you brought in a new coach. Now, maybe that new coach is what you need. Maybe they need a fresh group of perspectives with this particular group of players. But one thing that you should not lose sight of, the difference between the Predators and the Titans, because they've drafted so poorly and there's no farm system, their roster is a ways away from having the talent to compete. Whereas in hockey, this is what Barry Trotz has been banking on from the start. Yes, they have an older group of players, and they were going for it. Make no secret about it. D-Mace is dead on right. They were going for it this year. But they are doing it in a unique way where they did not mortgage any future assets to do it. So what Barry Trotz keeps harping on is he's got to have the younger players deliver with all of this work they've done to acquire draft picks, develop them in the minor leagues. And the frustrating thing is they really haven't seen the fruits of it yet, right? I mean, you're watching players and you're waiting, somebody pop. Like last night, Columbus, anybody who's a Columbus fan is watching their high first-round picks that they've accumulated, and even some non-first-round picks. They're hitting, and it's exciting. They can score. They're not a great team right now, but they're fun because they've got some talent. It's now a matter of taking it to the next level, and they need more veterans probably. But Nashville desperately needs, for Barry Trotz's plan to work, for some of these young guys to take big steps forward, and it hasn't happened yet.
615-737-1025. Our phone and text lines are, of course, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. How can the Predators sell bringing back Andrew Brunette? If you were Barry Trotz and you were making this decision and you decided to bring back Andrew Brunette, is there a way that you feel the Predators can justifiably sell to the fan base bringing back the coach after this disaster of a season? 615-737-1025. Coming up next, when we talked to Elliot Freeman last week, a really good conversation with Elliot Freeman about this subject. He brought up something that I've been thinking about over the past couple of days as it relates to the Predators, and we'll get to that next. 615-737-1025. Speaking of the Predators, if you want to win tickets to a Predators game, then be listening to Robbie and Rexroad tomorrow morning for Preds Pick to Click. All you have to do is guess a Preds goal scorer, and if they put the puck in the back of the net, you win. Be listening tomorrow for the cue to call on Robbie and Rexroad.
Okay, let's talk Loan Pronto for a minute. What could you do with an extra $50, $75, even $100,000? Well, if you're looking around saying, look, I have a home improvement project and we just did an estimate on it and we're in the ballpark here of what we need. This is what we want to do, but how do we fund it? Well, think about Loan Pronto because they're the leader in quickly converting home equity into cold hard cash. Yes, home equity. That's what you've got in your home. If you're a homeowner, the average homeowner has hundreds of thousands of dollars in equity. So convert that into cold hard cash and you can pay off that home remodel. You've got your funding and you'll make your house even more valuable. Loan Pronto has several easy options to let you access that cash. There's no paperwork, no cumbersome process, no junk fees, often no appraisal. And the average homeowner ends up saving money, cutting monthly expenses. So find out more by calling 615-499-5780. That's 615-499-5780 or go to loanpronto.com to get that money you need. Loanpronto.com. Equal housing lender, NMLS 166-1781, subject to lender approval, NMLSconsumeraccess.org.
This week's Nashville's best deal comes from Bad Axe Throwing Nashville, downtown's largest axe throwing venue and your go-to spot for food, fun, and vibes. Enjoy panoramic views of the city, a killer soundtrack, craft cocktails from the full bar, and a Northwoods-inspired menu with a southern twist. This week, score half off a $50 gift card while supplies last. Head to thegamenashville.com/deals and grab yours. Now, Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you talking Nashville Predators. By the way, Jordan in Nashville texted in and said that I need to go through conduct training again after my nickname for Willie Donick. Again, I'm just saying, Willie Donick is currently in Dallas, Texas. People refer to Dallas, Texas as Big D. Willie's last name starts with a D. I think it's perfectly acceptable.
Well, if you say so.
Not really.
Nah, but
Willie is
I'll pass.
Willie is eerily silent on this topic.
very much so. He
I
said,
just don't feel. I don't feel the surge of energy behind that nickname.
All right.
I don't think it's going to stick.
We'll keep workshopping it. We'll keep workshopping it.
Keep working. Talk to your people.
Oh wait, I'll have a meeting after the show with my people.
With your
So Pierre LeBrun wrote at The Athletic last week. He was writing about coaches in general, not just about Andrew Brunette, but he wrote about Andrew Brunette at the end of this column on The Athletic. And he wrote, quote, Brunette has 2 years left after this season, plus an option year. My understanding of the situation with the Nashville Predators is that if GM Barry Trotz had wanted to make a change, it would have already happened. He believes in Brunette and thinks the adversity this season will serve him well. The expectation is that Brunette will be back behind the bench next season. And we talked about that last Friday with Elliot Friedman of Sportsnet. And Elliot brought up something that caught my ear. Remember, Barry Trotz, during his weekly conversations with Jared Stillman, it was right before the trade deadline, right after the team came back from the Four Nations face-off break. So this is late February, early March. And Barry Trotz said that before the season resumed, he met with the leaders of the team, the top players on the team, and said, frankly, are you in? If you are, great. If not, I will look to move you. And all of those players stuck around. So it certainly seems like all of those players said, we want in. But Elliot mentioned, if I recall correctly, Elliot mentioned that the exit meetings for the Nashville Predators are going to be crucial to this decision. So although those top players, and we can all assume who those top players were, if those top players were in late February, who's to say that they'll still be in a couple of weeks? How many meaningless regular season games has Philip Forsberg played in his NHL career? Not very many. When was the last time Steven Stamkos played meaningless regular season games? It's been a while. So although those top players were apparently in before the trade deadline, that doesn't mean that they're still in or will still be in a couple of weeks now that the season is over in the playoffs.
When you say in, you mean in with the coach or in with staying in Nashville? I thought it was more of a discussion of, do you want to be here long term?
You're right. I guess let me rephrase. I do imagine, however, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Willie, that the coach is a part of that decision, right? If Philip Forsberg,
I don't think that would be part of the discussion at the trade deadline. I think that the trade deadline would be, you want to be in Nashville?
But it will be part of the discussion at the end of the season.
Yes, I think that's the distinction. But I
Yes.
think we need to make that distinction.
That is fair.
Because that's a different conversation.
That is fair. So, but my point largely remains that the exit meetings, what these players say as they're departing for the summer, could change Barry Trotz's mind. If he has indeed landed on bringing back Andrew Brunette next season, maybe he hears things in those exit meetings that make him think differently. You are right that I should add that context, but I think my larger point ultimately remains.
Well, let's go again with what Barry has said. Not my opinion, but after the trade deadline, he had a press conference where he certainly talked as if Andrew Brunette was going to be the coach going forward. And then Jared, I believe, a week or two later, asked him to clarify that, and he said, it's still being evaluated. He didn't mean to say that it's clear cut. And so that's where I am. on it right now. I don't think it's clear cut either way with the coach. I would say this. You were talking about, Adam, you're not in the locker room every day. My observation, based on what Barry has said, getting feedback from the coaches, listening to Andrew Burnett, that those two are still communicating. Yesterday's interview between Barry Trotz and Jared referenced a lot of conversations that Barry Trotz is having with Andrew Burnett right now. Does that mean he's back next year? No, I don't believe it does. But it means they're still communicating. They're still talking about the future. They're not speaking, right? There are times, like you said, Adam, there are times you can sense it where it's not going well. They're not on the same page, and something's got to give. It happened in Philadelphia just last week. They were not on the same page after the trade deadline, and it came to a head, and they didn't even wait till the end of the season. So I don't think that's the case here. But I think Elliott's point, the one you mentioned, after the season, when it's all over and you get feedback from the veterans, that's maybe when you can get a sense, get information that helps you make a tough decision. As Hal Gill always says, when you lose and you have the most disappointing season in your franchise's history, people get fired. People get traded. Changes happen. You don't stand pat. So there will be changes. It's just a matter of what the changes are.
Hair Metal Henry on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, says, other than the factor, meaning Ryan O'Reilly, I wish the top players were in on the defensive side of things. I have never seen a group of top 6 forwards so disinterested in playing in the defensive zone. Your thoughts?
Well, if you're talking about last night, maybe you're right, but I don't think that that's always the case. I think their attention to detail on defense as a team has not been good. I think it's gotten better. One thing that Barry Trotz talked about, this is a weird stat. They've had a stretch of games here where they've done a good job of suppressing shots. They haven't given up a lot of shots on goal. Last night would not be in that category. But they've given up 21 or less shots, I think 11 times this year, and they've only won 2 of the games. It's a really weird stat. It plays havoc with your goalie's save percentage, which is why you can't just look at save percentage when you're evaluating the goalie. You have to look at the quality of the shots they're giving up. So they have worked on that tirelessly because they were way underwater early, trying to figure out their defensive system. And I think that's also at the core of what Barry Trotz is talking through with Andrew Burnett. What is the right way to play Andrew Burnett's system? And I think the Andrew Burnett system of go, 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 my defense is having the puck on the other end. If we don't have the puck, let's get it back. This particular group, in part, I think Barry Trotz realizes he's partially responsible for the hand that he deals as coach, who wants to play that way. This group is probably not cut out to play that way. And so you're trying to find the adjustment. The coach then it falls on the coach to adjust all of this to have the right system for the players that you have. So that's where it's gotten into a mess. And complicating everything, the last thing they thought they would have when they started the season was a team that couldn't score. And this is a team that cannot score. It is unbelievable. And it weighs on everything, including your defensive game, right? When you're not scoring, it affects the way you play defense. You're down. You don't have confidence. You lose. You start cheating for offense. You're not locking down and believing that you're going to score. We just need to get some stops. We'll eventually score a goal. I think it's, man, we can't score. We got to get out there. We got to score. And they tried too hard sometimes. It has become a perfect storm of everything that can go wrong has gone wrong.
Absolutely. I do not dispute that. My larger point, which I made in the previous segment, was, and this is not meant to be, disparaging of Predators fans, because it absolutely is not. Willie and I, and there are others as well, Willie and I, we like to dig into the numbers. We like to get into the weeds on the process and all of the fancy stats we like to throw out, right? And if you dig into that, there are certain signs that this team has made progress over the course of the season, even if the record and the goals don't reflect that. Generally speaking, however, I think a lot of fans just see, as Derek was talking about earlier, the fact that the Predators were the first team in NHL history. I kid you not. The Predators were the first team in NHL history to acquire two 40-goal scorers in the same offseason, Steven Stamkos and Jonathan Marchessault. And I don't mean like in their career, the previous season. The Predators were the first team in NHL history to do that. And this is the offensive product that the Predators have put on the ice. And that is why fans don't understand why the Predators could bring back Andrew Brunette. He is supposed to be a brilliant offensive mind. I think generally he is a brilliant offensive mind. He's a good coach. He is not the right coach for this team. I said this in November, and I stand by it now. So I just think that the Predators, as I said before, are going to have to make a Herculean effort to sell to their fans who will watch their team miss the playoffs for the second time in 3 seasons that bringing back this coach is a good idea. And I don't know how they're going to do it. If they decide to do it, I'm incredibly fascinated. We will take your reaction. 615-737-1025 on our phone and text lines, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. It's time for the 4th annual 615 Open Charity Golf Tournament. Cromwell Media, along with partners Fox 17, Outfront Media, and Social Indoor, are proud to announce we will be back at Hermitage Golf Course on Thursday, May 29th to make a difference while having a great time. You can join us and a few guest media members, athletes, and musicians as we raise money for Vault of Honor. Donations will go to provide life-changing scholarships to families of America's fallen or disabled military and first responders. Sign up to play or sponsor at 615open.com.
D-Mace, Vingan, and Donick, DVD, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Chase McCabe stepping in for a second with Willie Donick, who is in Dallas. Hello, Willie.
Hello, Chase.
It's picture day here at 102.5 The
Yeah.
Game. So
How do the guys look?
they look good. They look good. They
Yeah?
color coordinated. I know there was a lot of discussion about that, and so they look good. So we'll get yours when you return from the road trip. But I know you guys have been discussing the Nashville Predators and their struggles. I don't know how to put it anymore. It just get us through these 7 games and let's start looking ahead to next year. That's how I feel.
Yeah, it's been a bad year. There's no way around it. You're hoping that the silver lining is you get a high draft pick. And Barry Trotz has used the term thread the needle. The thing that gives you hope, they have not mortgaged the future to try to have this season where they went for it. Every Jumbotron, by the way, Chase, where I go, and last night was the first time we've been in Columbus. The Jumbotron greeting to the fans, a little preview of the game that everybody does their own version of, always starts with this. Tonight's opponent, the Nashville Predators, they spent big in free agency, and it hasn't worked out. So that is the Predators in two sentences. Every single broadcast, when they introduce the opposing team, has a theme. Like, what's the theme of the Blue Jackets? We know. Young team. They had a tragic situation that's beyond words with Johnny Gaudreau, and they've been a great story to be in this position. They are one of the best stories in the league. So every team has a little thumbnail, quick sketch of the story of their year to this point, and we know exactly what the Predators one is. There's no doubt about it. The question is, where does it go from here?
I'll say this, and look, I know that some of it is, well, what do you expect them to say or what have you, but Philip Forsberg was on our show this morning, and we kind of closed it out of appreciating him for doing this, and obviously know that it hadn't been the best year, and he goes, I want everybody to know that we're committed to fixing this, and you have to go through the darkness to enjoy the sunny days, and we're willing to do that. And just the way he said it, I was just like, I really appreciate that, because he's somebody that's going to be here a while. I mean, he's one of these contracts that we've talked about, and I think we all agree that Philip has not had the best year. Obviously, he was close to 50 goals last year. He's knocking on 30 for this year, so the fall off was there, but he's willing to to look at this and go, all right, we got to change some stuff. And so I don't know if it makes the fans feel better to hear him say that. It does me, because he could very easily go through the motions of an interview and it's like, all right, let's just get through it. And he doesn't do that. And there's a lot of guys on this team that don't do that. So I do feel that they're committed to fixing this. It's just, what is it going to take to fix it?
I admire Phil for saying that, because it has been a challenge for Philip. There's no doubt about it. And I think he would tell you it's not his best year, and there's so much on him. That's what has to be put in context, is if he's not doing it, unfortunately, he hasn't gotten a lot of help. There's been very little secondary scoring. So, when you're on a team that's not scoring well, it always comes back to him. Hey, why isn't Forsberg scoring more? He had 48 last year, so I'm sure that weighs on him a lot. And he could probably give you a lot of excuses and reasons. But like he should, he's got to put some of it on himself. And he's got to dig in and say he's got to be part of the solution. Any team who's doing well, you always look at, how are the top players doing, right? We had this discussion over and over with Ryan Johansson and Matt Duchene. They were among the highest paid players on the team, and they were not anywhere close to the value of the percentage of the salary cap they were making, and so they made changes there. And so look at the year that Roman Josi and Philip Forsberg had last year. They both had outstanding years, and the team had a really good year as a result. This year, not nearly the same. And so, I hope that they stay with it, and Forsberg in particular. Here's another thing that's gone on with Forsberg, right? He's gone from having a really good tight circle of friends a few years ago with Victor Arvidsson, Matthias Ekholm, Kalle Jarnkrok. Those guys were tight, right? They're still, to this day, great friends. I think he had a good relationship with Gus Nyquist. He gets traded, right? So right now, there's not a lot of Swedish mafia. They used to joke and say, hey, we're the Swedish mafia. You know, they're driving around together. They're all young players. Philip's at a different stage of his life now. And so I think that's something that he's dealing with too as they get through the slog here. And all of these things, when you're winning, you don't worry about it as much. But when you're not winning, you're looking around. Maybe that stuff weighs on you a little bit. Just a theory of mine. I've not talked to Philip about that. But I like that he's got that mindset that, hey, we just got to get through this storm, and hopefully they'll be stronger for it.
Willie, in your mind, when they start the season next year, does either one or both of a Joachim Kimmel or Reed Schaefer need to be on this roster?
I'm not sure. I think either one of those guys will be on the roster to start next year. I still think those guys are a little ways away, realistically. Kimmel probably a little closer than Schaefer. Schaefer's been injured a lot. He got off to a great start this year. I think made a jump. But the young part of the equation is essential. We're going to get a look at Matthew Wood. I heard Barry Trotz tell Jared yesterday Matthew Wood's going to join the team here in Dallas. So I think he will arrive and sort of get a feel. I would not, and he stopped short of saying he'll be in the lineup tomorrow, even though you're looking at going, boy, they need a 12th forward. They only have 11 forwards, but I don't think they want to put him into a really tough situation for his first game. So I think they want him to get acclimated, practice with the team for a few days, be around it a little bit more before they put him in. But Matthew Wood is now the next guy that they've signed in this large pool of prospects that was rated in the top 10 for the Athletic. But what is that equated to as far as wins for the Predators? Not a lot right now. So whether it's Kimmel or it's Wood or it's Schaefer or it's guys you're watching right now, Svechkov, David Edstrom, who's playing over in Europe, Tanner Molendyk, they've got to get those guys into the lineup and succeeding for the Predators long term. But when is that going to happen, Chase? That's the question. I don't know if it's going to be at the beginning of next year. That's probably a little unrealistic to expect that.
So along those lines, I'll play devil's advocate a little bit. And, you know, I certainly give Barry Trotz the benefit of the doubt. He has earned that right. But I do wonder sometimes, and I hear what you're saying on Kimmel, you know, and Schaefer. They are young. I think they're both 20 years old. So obviously they have a lot of growing to do. But I do wonder sometimes, do they let them cook a little too long in the minors? And how many times have you seen a guy that, you know, might be discouraged playing in the American League and not getting a shot in the NHL, and then he does, and he flourishes? Because that's just, you know, sometimes that just happens, and being around, you know, top tier players in the NHL. I mean, and at the same time, you mentioned Svechkov. He got called up out of necessity because they needed him, and he's had to grow into it. So I certainly see both sides to it. But at what point does Barry Trotz kind of decide, hey, you know what, I'm just going to let these guys kind of grow at the NHL level, even though that might go against what he has done in the past?
It's a tough balance. And I think of Barry Trotz when you throw that out there as a guy who coached for a long time and understands how tough it is sometimes to be patient with young players who don't know how to win yet. So you can roll those guys out there. Let's take the last night's opponent, Columbus. The last few years, they've rolled out some guys, and they took their lumps. They got smoked, and they still are not a good defensive team at all. But they're playing through it, and now they're starting to at least have a chance to win. Now, you could argue that last team that gets into the playoffs for the East for a second straight year isn't a very good team. They're in the playoffs, but they're not. They're a flawed team for sure. Any of them, pick it. Whether it's Montreal, whether it's the Rangers, whether it's the Blue Jackets, or whoever you want to name. That's not a great team. Somebody's got to get into that 8th spot. But are those teams on the rise? Well, that's what Columbus hopes for with these young players. But I think that's the dilemma. You're watching it right now with Svechkov. He's being asked to do a little bit more than he's probably capable of right now. at his age. And so I'm hoping he ends up, like you said, getting stronger quicker because of it, going through the failures and coming out the other side tougher. What's better, doing that or developing in Milwaukee? That's the debate. But in the meantime, while he's out there struggling, it might be good for him, but it's hard to win when he's in
Sure.
that spot. So if you have too many of those guys, you get beat.
Well,
That look at the Ducks, look at the Sabres, look at the Senators, look at the Blue Jackets. There's 5 or 6 teams that have thrown a lot of these guys out there as young players. Chicago going through it right now. San Jose, they've got some exciting high first round picks, and they're getting smoked night in and night out, and they're a ways from winning. But that's the way they've chosen to do it.
yeah, no, it's all fair. And I mean, there's going to be a lot of time for this discussion, and obviously seeing what they do in the off season, as they have 7 games left in the regular season. Is it 7 or 6? 7.
I've lost track.
I've lost track too,
7.
but it's close. I know that much. Willie, your cohorts
The end
are
is
ready.
near.
They are ready to rejoin the show, so I will turn it back over to them. I know you have Jonathan Hutton coming up here in just a few minutes, so I have enjoyed talking some Preds with you.
Good stuff, Chase.
Absolutely. I'm Chase McCabe. DVD resumes coming up next. 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
D. Mace Fingan and Donick 1025, 1063 The Game. Broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership where the buzz is always about great service. We're back. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you. Derek and I thank Chase McCabe for filling in for us for a segment.
Yes,
We had to take our company pictures.
absolutely. We did the 1990s version of a prom picture or class picture. Yeah,
I was thinking more of
like
when
1990 class picture.
Did y'all do the Step Brothers photo?
we did not do the Step Brothers photo. Also, by the way, Jonathan Hutton from Hot Mike with Hutton Withrow is here with us as well. We can rope Hutton into this too. The pictures we did take were reminiscent. You're watching a game. You're on a network, so you're watching the Final Four on CBS. And in the lower part of the screen, there's a chyron, I think that's what it's called, for a new sitcom, and you have the two buddies back to back with the arms crossed, like these guys. They look nothing alike. They can't possibly be roommates or friends.
One's goofy, one's cool.
That's an odd couple. I can just look at this picture and I know those
Odd
two.
couple two.
Yes, those two get a crazy hijinks. So, but we
Why
took
was
our
it
pictures.
in middle school, guys? Why did our I don't know, why did my parents choose the 6th and 7th grade photos to keep and actually think those are good? That's the most awkward stage of any kid's life. And those are the ones where you're like, your awkward phase where your teacher's trying to force you to look stupid. You don't have half your teeth and all that stuff. You're like looking at the camera like you're cross-eyed.
Well, I will tell you, adding to that humiliation is for those of you who were bar or bat mitzvah like I was, your bar mitzvah photos, which are taken in that same time, except you're in the suit that you never wear and you got your yarmulke on. Very strange. I did get a kick out of several months ago. We attended Jared Stillman's and his partner's, Lindsay's, baby shower. And Derek was getting a kick out of all of Jared's family photos and his bar mitzvah photos, right?
Yes, mainly his bar mitzvah photos. It was just like a collage of Jared, and it was the way he was standing on each one. I don't think he really knew what to do with his hands or his body, period. His mom was just stand there, Jared, take the picture.
It's always awkward.
Yeah.
You're always comparing yourself to the other people in the room. And everyone else crushes it, and then it's like, I'm awkward. And for whatever reason, like I didn't have like a ton of neckties growing up. I had a Winnie the Pooh necktie.
Oh,
that is in one of just in one of the photos. That again is the one that my parents just was like, they're like, this is the photo we're actually going to order from the school this year.
Hey, you're probably still a hit.
Yeah,
I remember that guy.
That's hanging at home, back home, just like Jared's collage.
Exactly.
Hutton, I was reading Field Yates's most recent mock draft at ESPN.com. It was published today. And of course, he has the Titans taking Cam Ward. No surprise there. But he writes underneath, quote, absent a Godfather-style trade offer, one the Titans cannot refuse. Also, can we retire the Godfather, he made me an offer I can't refuse? Can we put that into our list of banned?
That's a good
words and
question.
phrases?
That's debatable because that's a great movie. I mean, that's a great movie.
Nevertheless, absent a Godfather-style trade offer, one the Titans cannot refuse, Field Yates, I fully expect Tennessee to take Ward and build this franchise around him. Do you think that any team is going to make that Godfather-style trade offer between now and 3 weeks from tomorrow when mercifully the NFL draft begins?
No, I mean the Giants, with what they did in their quarterback room, kind of, they put that out. I mean, it would be Pittsburgh if Rodgers doesn't end up going there, but I mean, he's throwing with DK Metcalf. Look, what type of headline is that? I'm thinking, okay, if you do have the draft haul, yeah, you're going to make the trade, but that also tells me like the Titans are like every other team right now. They're not enamored with this quarterback crop. And I mean, it's the bad year to have last year we knew who the quarterback was going to be. In the great quarterback drafts, you know who the quarterback's going to be. And the draft info is always cyclical. I'm telling you, coming up, there will be reports that the Titans they can't make up their mind on what they want to do. It will go to that storyline and then back to
No,
Cam Ward being the number
100%.
one pick.
This is happening. There's no doubt about
It's
it.
going to happen. That they can't figure it out, and they're not getting the offer that they were hoping for. So they're at a crossroads. That will be the next headline that comes out from the NFL.
I predict that will come out a week from today after Colorado's pro day and Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter's private workout with the Titans. So bookmark it for a week from today. We will be hearing that storyline.
Yeah. And guys, I was thinking about this. It's the number one pick, and a team's trading for a quarterback. There is a minimum I've got to receive to give up that pick. There's the draft, and then there's this quarterback draft. And if the Giants or whoever is going to move up and draft Cam Ward, I need a future first-round pick. I mean, that's the going rate here. I'm not taking less just because it's a bad quarterback class. I've got to build up my roster. And hey, the Titans need a quarterback as well. So, it's either you give me future first-round picks, or, give me I'm getting my third-round pick that I don't have. I'm getting an extra second, whatever it might be. And if not, Ward can be our quarterback, because that's more valuable than whatever picks I'm going to get in return for a number one pick where the value is franchise quarterback. But I just don't think the draft haul is out there. And, I mean, what type of trade would it have taken for the Bears to trade out and give away Caleb Williams? We weren't hearing that. So, it's to me, that report is saying the Titans like him, but they may not. And I don't know what that ultimately is reporting.
I don't think I think everyone, and rightfully so, because the Titans haven't leaned too far one way or the other. If it does seem like they're leaning toward, selling off the pick or trading off the pick, they swing back the other way a little bit. So I think this is a case where they've set the bar so high, and they understand that, but they're just looking for that one team to, sort of take a bite and move up to the number one spot. But if not, then I think they're leaning more toward, if I had to bet, I think it would be Cam Ward. And they are all right with taking him, because I think and I've said this before, I think they believe that either way, they are going to be traveling down the road that they want to go as far as rebuilding this team. We can either do it by trading out of the number one pick and accumulate more picks, which lead us to our one, so many picks in the top 100 in so many years, or we can do it by drafting a quarterback. Either way, we are comfortable at moving forward. And I just think they set it so high that I don't think, unless these teams get extremely desperate, I don't think no one's moving up.
Yeah, and I mean, as a GM, I'm thinking my career is attached to this guy. It's the number one pick, and I'm taking a quarterback. And certainly the coach with a quarterback coaching background is getting not his first quarterback, but his second now in as many years. You don't have very much time, especially with Amy Adams-Strunk. Regardless of patience and the 3-year plan, they can talk all they have to show improvement. And are you going to be able to develop this guy? I mean, in the Anthony Richardson draft, behind the scenes, they were standing on the table for Anthony Richardson in Indianapolis. I don't get the sense the Titans are doing that. So are you putting your job on the line for that? Or are you trading down and you figure something else out? Are you trading for a quarterback in the league? I'm not saying, Mace, I would do that. I would roll the dice on a 50-50 proposition, quite frankly, with a rookie. But I understand the sentiment of, we're not sold on this guy, and the other teams aren't either, because we're not getting the draft haul that we want. And maybe it's a huge bluff. I just don't. Why play the long game there when you don't have as many suitors as maybe you thought you did?
Yeah, either way, I just think they're going to look at it from the standpoint, and you're right, but I just think they're going to look at it from the standpoint, listen, we'll take them. We feel good about them. I think eventually that's where they're going to get to. We'll take him. We feel, really good about what he can do for our franchise. Because if you don't want to give up the picks, because whether you believe that a draft is deep or not, the number one pick holds value. The
Yeah,
number one
absolutely.
pick in the draft holds value. And
Where
I
where
think
is
it's
Cam Ward on the value list though? Or
yeah.
just player for player.
hmm
I'm just not like I wouldn't list him in the top 5 right now.
I mean, I'd say he would probably he's still in the top 6 or 7 for me. Just overall talent. But is he a top 2, 3 guy? I don't know. I mean, because the
Maybe
top
Travis Hunter.
Travis Hunter would be one. Abdul Carter, but with his foot, yes, he
Sure.
could be 2, but the foot injury, and then behind that, you can throw anybody at that 3 spot. You can throw Genty at the 3 spot. You can
Yes.
throw one of the
Graham.
receivers. You can throw another defensive lineman. You can throw an offensive tackle in that list. After those top 2 guys, there's not like, oh my goodness, this guy's third. No, I can throw Cam as the 3rd best prospect or top 5 prospect. So if I can do that, if the Titans are thinking from that standpoint, if I can still have him in my top 5 prospects, then he's worthy of that number 1 pick. Or if I have him in my top 4, because everybody prospect list isn't the same.
No, that's fair. But here's the issue.
Mhm.
You've got a guy who's further down that list, if we're being fair about it, and he's coming in to start with this roster. I mean, and you have to show development.
Mhm.
That's where the rubber meets the road for me is what is realistic with this quarterback this year when Amy Adams-Strunk has made it clear, and they have made it clear about the head coach: draft, develop, and retain. That's what he has to show. And as we well know, it is tough to come into the league as a rookie and play well at quarterback, especially with a roster the way the Titans are built, where they have one wide receiver and not a true number 2. It's not as easy as the way things worked out in Washington and pieced together there. They don't have the roster and the talent and the veterans, Mace,
Mhm.
that Caleb Williams did. In he didn't have an offensive line, but he had veterans at receiver. Point being, what's realistic for a rookie coming in who's not the top tier A-list, A1 talent? If we're just listing off just pure NFL football players, some guys will be regarded as can't miss home runs. There we go back to the conversation the Titans were having. If you have a truly transcendent player, are you passing on that guy to take a guy that you're increasingly intrigued, I think is the way they're describing it. It's fascinating because this is just the year that they ended up with, and they have to have a quarterback, and we know their quarterback currently is Will Levis, the starter number 1. I don't think you can just roll it back with him.
It is the central question, no doubt about it. Jonathan Hutton is with us, Hot Mike with Hutton and Withrow. So another part of the equation, and I was reading about this today in terms of the Browns and what their plan might be, especially with their whole Deshaun Watson debacle that they're trying to get through. But somebody wrote an article suggesting, I think they had an unnamed executive saying, hey, they might be tanking to get Arch Manning next year. So first, let's talk about him specifically. Do we think next year at this time we'll be talking about Arch Manning, hands down first pick? Because we know it can change drastically from just month to month, let alone year to year.
I mean, his uncle stayed an extra year. They didn't come out early.
Yep. And he's not started. He started a couple of games because of injuries, right?
Yep.
So he won't have a lot of reps, even if he plays the whole year next year.
No guarantee that he's coming into the league automatically.
So, do we know of any other prospects right now?
Say that again, Willie.
Well, okay, let's finish up the thought on Manning first before
Yeah.
we get to other quarterbacks that might be out the next year. Because I think if you're the Titans and you have the first pick and you're going to pass on Ward, you have to be doing so with at least an idea, as much as you can know right now, about what could be coming down the pike next year.
That's fair. But I mean, the brand name, the name on the back of the jersey itself is phenomenal. Do I expect success? Yes, the man needs to have success. I just don't think that it's a foregone conclusion he's entering the draft a year from now. And then injuries play a factor, all that development, all of that. But you know you're getting the professional approach, and we also know that Archie made sure that Eli didn't go out west. So I think it just depends on the teams at the top as well with their business side of it too. And here's the thing about Cam Ward, to be fair for him, it's not a huge negative that he would be the third or fourth quarterback selected last year in a draft where 6 of the top 12 picks were quarterbacks for good reason. I mean, that still puts Cam in that mix. And the Titans would love to be in that mix right now, considering the options that they have if they don't go Cam Ward. There's just not the true alternative that I think everyone's just pointing to. If they trade back, trade back and get Shador, there's just no guarantee. If you want the quarterback, you have to draft him as you have him at number 1. And it's a quarterback league. Are you tying yourself to him, or are you going to play the long game and try to figure out something with the veteran? It's a huge decision where there is a lot of indecision about which way to go right now.
We know the Predators are probably going to have, depending on what happens in the lottery, somewhere 3, 2, 1, between 1 and 5. What a lot of people say, and this comes up some in football, but maybe not as specific to the quarterback as sometimes you hear in other sports. For example, this is not supposed to be a loaded draft for the NHL. Next year's draft is considered supposedly going to be a lot better. Now, how they know that, it's hard because the kids in next year's draft right now are 16 or 17 years old. That's crazy to think about. But apparently the high-end talent is that good for next year that it's significantly better than this year, at least in terms of depth. But quarterbacks, so beyond Manning, do we think that there's a potential crop of quarterbacks that could be better than this year's group? Because that's the wrap on this year's group. It's not a great year if you need a quarterback in the first round. What do we know about next year?
Well, I mean, I think what we get stuck doing, I say we as the collective sports fan and media members, we're comparing it to the crop this year. I do like the quarterbacks that stayed back. Carson Beck in Miami is going to have success. He's going to be playing an easier schedule. So, I mean, he's going to look really good. Aller, he's going to look really good when he's not playing Ohio State or Michigan. That's what happens. But I do like the prospects of them. And and we're also discussing quarterbacks who were behind Manning now in the talking head world, but who were, preseason favorites for the Heisman and the number 1 overall pick a year ago in Vegas. So, I mean, compared to Shador, who, there was hype about him being a top 5 or top 10 pick, but it was Carson Beck that everyone was talking about for number 1. I guess that's what I'm saying. There was always next year's crop was always ahead of this one. And so I think as the collective group, we're stuck comparing it, but actually trying to spin it as if it's some great, 2024 draft. What we saw last year is few and far between. You also have to have the teams line up the way it did last year that need quarterbacks, and or a team that's willing to, give up the farm to move up to get that guy. And it fell the right way last year for everyone but Vegas.
It's always evolving, and now you've got older quarterbacks staying in school. That's making it a little different than it was evaluating 5 or 10 years ago, for sure. But
they're not developed the same way because they're moving around so much.
Oh, yes. Another factor.
The coaches just jam pack everything in. There's no time to develop the player for your system because he's leaving. That's going to play a factor too in how these guys are graded.
Quick one on Tennessee and sort of closing the book on this era, because they're going to have to have a lot of new players next year, and that's one that I'm intrigued to see how Rick Barnes goes about it. But as you try to, when we look back on this group with Ziegler and these guys that have gone through it, so close to making the Final Four without making it. D. Mace and I and Adam had a great debate on this on Monday, because I made the point that there are over 100 programs that would sign up for the last 5 to 7 years and maybe beyond of what Rick Barnes has done. But yet, in some people's minds, it this leaves you wanting more, even though they lost to a great team. They lost to a 1 seed the last couple of years. So it's hard to say that they came up short of expectations. But at the same time, you have all these chances to get to the Final Four, and they haven't had the breakthrough year. It's a tough one to sort of it's a tough nut to crack, shall we say.
It felt like the Titans Bengals game in the playoffs to me. You throw 3 picks and you just come out and fumble the ball. Like you didn't play like you had consistently played during the season. And it was one of those nights, but it's also like give credit to Houston. We knew it was going to be a grind, and 15 points at halftime, and you're just thinking like, what just happened here? There were a handful of players extremely emotional over the weekend. We see this every year, but I mean, like truly, the coaches there is a camaraderie, a friendship, a family aspect that I'm not sure we will feel as much of in the coming years, because the teams that are put together on an annual basis are beating the other team that kind of mesh well together. But there is a sentimental aspect of that I appreciate. So, I also gravitated to that thought just because, I mean, there's Houston, who they keep players together. Of course, Duke's got a lot of players that they brought in, but the freshmen, right? But I mean, Michigan State comes to mind. There were teams like that. And then you have a lot of transfers. I mean, the graphic from the other day, last week, was phenomenal.
Wasn't that something?
But there are plenty of players. But, the Vols had transfers. But it felt like they had been together for some time, because you just don't feel that same passion. Like you don't remember the names on the back of the jersey and who they play for. And that was this team. So yeah, I think this one will take a long time for these guys to get over, because they had it right in front of them. And a team like Houston, where if you come out and make your shots, you get a great chance to win that game. And they felt like they were starting to pick up and catch fire again.
Jonathan Hutton from Hot Mike with Hutton and Withrow joining us on D-Mace, Vingan, and Donick. Hutton, great stuff as always. We'll talk next week.
Do we all have Duke winning it or no?
You're not getting that answer from me.
I have
I'm
Florida.
not going to say it.
Before but my bracket, and I'm a guy that is I am religious in the I fill out one bracket. I might enter a lot of pools, but I'm filling out one bracket. I'm not doing one over here, one over there, entering 3 different ones over here. I have one bracket, and it's got Florida beating Duke in the final. So Florida has to beat Auburn and then beat Duke. That's not easy. And of course Duke's got to beat Houston. Houston is way better than I thought. I did not think a team could bully Tennessee. Tennessee is one of the toughest teams that I watched all year long, and they just flat out got bullied by Houston. So any one of the 4 could win it, I think. But I've got I got to go with what I said beforehand, before the tournament started. Florida over Duke.
Florida's come back the way they did in 4 minutes. It was a championship moment.
I don't think Florida's played a great game. They've had to bail themselves out. They're lucky to be there.
That's how you win the title, though.
Yeah.
Hutton, hey, always great to be with you guys.
Always a pleasure. Jonathan Hutton joining us from Hot Mike with Hutton and Withrow, 615-737-1025. I do want to get into the Will Levis conversation, because Chad Brinker said some things about Will Levis to Jim White a couple of days ago we haven't addressed. Some interesting comments about the future of Will Levis with the Tennessee Titans. 615-737-1025. Let me tell all of you that D-Mace, Vingan, and Donick is proudly presented by Bet365. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 1025-1063 The Game.
This offensive line went from heinous as a group to what's expected to be a very solid group, something that Will Levis has not had a chance to work with. And then his receivers and tight ends have been one of the most abysmal as a group since Levis has been thrown out here in the NFL. He's got no protection. He's got negative protection. He's got horrific protection. And receivers that as a group are not getting open and not making plays for him. And he's trying to make plays, but making mistakes on the way. And because of that, Levis has not had a chance to show what he can do. I think if, with the improvement in the offensive line, if they could bring in some good young receivers to add to Calvin Ridley, Levis might end up being as good a quarterback as Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward will be in the NFL. I don't think they should bail on Levis right now because I don't think they have any idea how good Levis can be. And I think the fact that the label that's been hung around his neck that is more the offensive line and the receivers than it ever was him is totally unfair to Will Levis. And I would love to see him have a chance to compete for that starting job with better people around him.
Trevor Maddich going to the mattresses for Will Levis yesterday on Stillman and Company. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you. So let's talk Will Levis for a few minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Jim Wyatt sat down with Chad Brinker, a.k.a. the supreme ruler of football.
Of football.
Yes, at the league meetings in Palm Beach, Florida. And this is the quote that Chad Brinker gave to Jim Wyatt. Wyatt wrote, quote, "The Titans have not had trade talks with anyone about quarterback Will Levis, contrary to a report earlier this month." This is the quote from Brinker. "That's a false report. We have not contacted anybody, and nobody has contacted us about Will Levis. I don't think anything has changed from the time somebody asked me about this a month ago. What's the plan for Will Levis? The plan with Will Levis is he has a chance to compete for a starting job next year. And that's like every player that's on our roster. It's no different for Will. I see him in our facility. He's working hard. Everybody knows he's a great kid. He's a hard worker, and he's going to give it everything he has. And we're going to continue to work with Will Levis." That was Chad Brinker. This was Brian Callahan at those same meetings. Quote, "I had a very straightforward conversation with him when the season was over, when we were getting ready to leave. And I just said, look, you worry about you. Don't worry about anything else. Control the things you're capable of controlling and put the work in for yourself. It doesn't matter what we do or how we do it, and expect there to be competition. I'm excited to see what it looks like when he gets back." Let's start, Derek, with what Trevor Maddich said yesterday with Jared Stillman. Do you agree with any of that?
I agree with the analysis on and everybody. I mean, it doesn't take much to know that this offensive line wasn't good. But it affect others, and it affect each individual in different ways. So I do agree with that part that, okay, listen, the offensive line wasn't good. That's just the way it was. But I can point to other offensive lines that were not good, but yet and still, if you have it in you, you have it in you, you make do. You make things look, it may not have looked, 100% better, but if you are a player, it looks better than what we saw. And here's the thing. I do believe last year that whole regime made a mistake by not bringing in someone that was going to truly compete with Will Levis. I said this last year. That was going to compete with Will Levis. He walked in without proving much of anything, and it was his job. No, bring some. And Mason Rudolph was not any competition to him. He wasn't. Mason Rudolph was coming in. He came in here knowing he was the number 2, and you will play only if Will Levis get hurt or he just bombs out completely. But they didn't expect to bomb out completely. So there was never any competition established at that position, nor was there competition established at the right tackle position. 2 positions that they've had major problems with. And you don't bring in competition, that's incompetence in a sense. But they've had him for a year. And this is where I start to deviate from what Trevor said. They've had him for a year. They know him better than I do. They know him better than Trevor does. They know him better than you, Adam, or you, Willie. They've seen it day in, day out. So much so that they brought in Brandon Allen and another quarterback. They didn't look at last season and say, we don't need to bring anybody else in. Matter of fact, we don't even need to draft somebody. Because even under that circumstance, Will Levis still showed that he can play. There's a difference. There's a reason why, and they sort of masked it as, Will Levis is hurt. But there's a reason why Mason Rudolph played. Because not that he was just, he was going to take him to the playoffs. No, because that he knew that putting him in, the offense would look a little bit different. The way he can call plays is a little bit different when Mason Rudolph's in the game. Why? It's not that Mason Rudolph is great, but Mason Rudolph, from a mentality standpoint, from the shoulders up, he's a little bit better than Will Levis. So it gives our offense an opportunity to move forward in a sense. They've seen what they needed to see of Will Levis. And unless he comes back, again, unless Will Levis comes back and he just showed that he made a 180 as a quarterback, he is it. If they draft Cam Ward, and I'm saying this in assuming that they're going to draft Cam Ward, what he's doing is battling for a backup position. That's what he's doing. And if he can't beat out the backup, he's gone. Will Levis is not in their future, I don't believe. He's in their future for a starting quarterback. If he shows something, if we choose not to trade him, matter of fact, listen, they may trade him during the draft. They may do that to get a third-round pick. So let's not look at what they said right now. Let's watch what they do in the draft. Nobody's called us. We hadn't reached out. Yeah, you're right. They haven't. But let's wait until the draft and see if that thought changes. So to me, that's where I deviate from Trevor Maddich. Is I think they've seen enough of Will Levis from the shoulder up that they believe he's not a starting quarterback.
615-737-1025. Your reaction, your thoughts on what Trevor Maddich had to say yesterday on Stillman and Company. We will continue this conversation coming up next. But before we do, the Atlanta Braves country road trip is coming to town and teaming up with the Nashville Predators and 1025 The Game. Join us at the BetMGM Sports Lounge inside Bridgestone Arena 2 weeks from today, Wednesday, April 16th, for a Braves watch party as they take on the Tampa Bay Rays at noon. There will be free giveaways like hats and t-shirts. Plus, you can win autographed baseballs and free tickets. For more details, visit thegamenashville.com/events. D. Mace, Finnegan, and Donick, 1025, 1063, the game. This Saturday, don't miss Nashville Superspeedway's pre-race concert contest. Nashville's next rising star at Dierks Bentley's Whiskey Row from 1 to 5 p.m. The contest will be emceed by 1025 The Game's Big Joe Dubin, and special guest DJ Mojo will keep the crowd hyped all afternoon. For more details, visit theGameNashville.com/events. So we're talking Will Levis. We heard what Trevor Maddich had to say yesterday on Stillman and Company. We just got Derek's thoughts. Let's get Willie's thoughts on what Trevor Maddich had to say.
One thing I learned about Trevor a long time ago, and for those that are newer to our station, Trevor, when he first started coming on the station, I was doing the afternoons with George and Floyd for the late Floyd Reese years ago. And I learned very early that Trevor is never, and this is what I really like about him, he is never afraid to go with the contrarian view that is certainly not with the narrative that a lot of people find themselves falling into in a big group of people. If I ever taught a media studies class in high school or college or something, I think I would have that as one of my subjects, is how a narrative collective starts in a particular subject in a different sports. But Trevor's not afraid to go against the grain. That being said, I really don't. I respect his view as a evaluator of football. He is outstanding. I don't agree with his take on Levis. I don't know that it was, obviously he was not surrounded by, a loaded team by any stretch at all. But I think week in and week out, you could see the flaws. And I think that's the Titans' evaluation of him, is that they can do better. Everything they've suggested. So Brinker's, I think, enthusiasm to tell you that he hasn't called anybody, he's not shopping around Will Levis, is just to sort of create the perception that they're keeping all of their options open, that they have all of these ways they can go. And so what that does is maybe have people guessing what they're going to do with the first pick. I think the hay's in the barn on their analysis of Levis. And I think, like D-May said, I think at this point it's deciding whether he's the right guy to be your backup, or is he better off getting a fresh start somewhere else where there's no expectations? And if I were advising Will Levis's camp, I think I would want the fresh start somewhere else with all that in mind.
The question I have, and Jared talked about this yesterday, he said he's worried that his one of his biggest fears may be realized, which is Will Levis starting at quarterback for the Tennessee Titans in 2025 if the Titans trade out of the number 1 overall pick, draft a different player at a different position, and they're not going to start Brandon Allen. They're not going to start Tim Boyle. Will Levis has more starting experience in the NFL than the two of those players. So if they don't draft a quarterback, it'll probably be Will Levis. We've talked about what that could look like, what it could mean. But it kind of goes back to what we were talking about with the Predators, right? If you're a Titans fan and the Titans trade out of the number 1 pick and they accumulate other assets and they take another player, let's just say Travis Hunter. But that means that Will Levis is going to be starting games again for the Tennessee Titans. Derek, how do you sell that? How do you sell that to Titans fans? Hey, we know you really enjoyed watching Will Levis play football last year. You thought you were done? Nope. He's going to start again.
You don't try to sell it because it's not something you can sell as an organization. You don't sell it. If they choose to move out of that number 1 spot, that doesn't tell me that Will Levis is their quarterback for this upcoming season. It doesn't. What it tells me is it's going to be a competition battle, and they will pick the best guy out of the bunch. It's just not this foregone conclusion that Brandon Allen be the backup, Will Levis will end up being a starter. No, I think that they're going to allow them to compete. This is assuming they move out of that number 1 pick. There may not be another quarterback out there for them. And then again, they can trade for a quarterback, during that whole process. But this is sort of projecting them not to trade for a quarterback, but to trade out of that number 1 pick. I think Will Levis is going to have to prove to them without a shadow of a doubt that he's the starting quarterback. I think in their mind, they've seen everything. They would rather go with Brandon Allen, someone that has sort of been in this system. I think the two systems are alike in San Fran. I'm sure they are. The verbiage, and he even said it, I believe, the verbiage. So I think they believe he has it from the shoulder up. So they're going to allow them to compete for the starting job, and the best guy will win, with them leaning more toward Brandon Allen, I believe. Again, I believe in their mind, Will Levis is a backup quarterback. But I'm not saying he's a backup quarterback to Cam Ward. He's going to be, I think they believe, unless he comes in there and just blows it away, he's a backup to anybody. They would rather go, if it's close, I think they go with Brandon Allen. Will Levis is not their guy. He's damn sure is not Borgonzi's guy. So in my mind, if it's close, I'm going with Brandon Allen.
What I'm
Yeah,
curious,
but you're basically just tabling the quarterback position. So you have to be careful on how you say that, but
Yeah.
you try to be transparent and honest with your fans in terms of Adam's question. And if you do,
But you tell them
end
that it's
up coming
going to be,
back
it's going to be,
his
you're
competition.
competing for the
he's
starting
not being
quarterback.
handed
Yeah,
the job. Yeah,
exactly.
he's not being handed the job. He's got to win the job. And if he does win the job, hey, look, we've decided not to take a quarterback with the first pick. We didn't see anything out there that was the right thing. We're building the roster. It's going to take some time. And in the meantime, we're going to have a quarterback competition. If Will Levis wins the job, then maybe Trevor's right. And he unexpectedly takes a step forward, and that's a good thing. I still don't think that really changes their long-term view. It doesn't mean they wouldn't be looking for a quarterback next year, because what is the one thing Will Levis has going for him? He's cheap. He costs you nothing. So you can have him on the roster, and if he somehow finds it, okay, nothing wrong.
Listen,
and if he's the same as we've always thought, then hey, he's cheap. Yeah, and you're moving on. And next year you'd have this search again. I don't think I fault the Titans for not doing anything. I'd be a hypocrite if I said they should have gone out and thrown a boatload of money at Sam Darnold. I don't think that was the right thing. We were on the frontier. There wasn't much out there.
the question I have is, sorry, Derek. The question I have is, what value would Will Levis have in a trade? The one trade I always go back to is the trade that the Steelers and Eagles made for Kenny Pickett. When the Steelers traded Kenny Pickett to the Eagles, now Kenny Pickett is on the Cleveland Browns. The Steelers received a 3rd round pick and 2 7th round picks for Pickett and a 4th round pick. Is there a team out there that would make a similar deal for Will Levis? I doubt it. Is it I'll take what I can get for Will Levis, or are you hoping for a Pickett-like return on investment in a trade for Will Levis?
The only reason you're trading Will Levis, I believe, is if you draft Cam Ward. Then I think the thought about trading Will Levis becomes clearer, and or the picture becomes clearer with Will Levis. So unless, outside of them drafting a quarterback with the 1st overall pick, I'm not sure if a team is going to give them, anything substantial that they're going to move on. Again, they will, if that is indeed the case, I think they're okay with, even though I don't prescribe to it. I think if you draft Cam Ward, you need to, if you can only get pennies on the dollar for Will Levis, then that's what you do. Or you let it play out during camp, let him get some camp snaps, and hopefully a team, you cross your fingers that maybe a team needs that second backup quarterback because the other guy didn't work out. Then you facilitate a trade like that. But if you draft Cam Ward, I think you have to move on from Will Levis. And if I was Will Levis, I would be telling my representative, like, let's find a way let's not make it public, or try not to make it public, but let's find a way to facilitate a trade where I can go somewhere early enough where I can learn an offense and really truly compete for a starting position. But I'm gonna say this about Brandon Allen, and this is why I believe that there's a reason why they brought him in here. They brought him in to Will to be the backup to him, if anything, but Brandon Allen to be the backup to the guy that they're going to ultimately draft. Outside of San Francisco, where San Francisco had a lot of problems last year, a lot of them, hence they end up with the season that they had. Their offensive line was in flux. Their guys were getting injured. One of their best players played half the season, so they were depleted of talent. Offensive line wasn't good. So he went out there and played behind a situation that wasn't advantageous for him. But people just look at, oh, he couldn't do it in San Francisco. No, San Francisco was a dumpster fire last year. And whatever his numbers were, they were. But when he was in Denver and Cincinnati, you started to see some of the progression as a quarterback, the more snaps he got. So looking at that alone tells me that Brian Callahan believes in Brandon Allen. Why? Because I saw him, I had him before, and I saw what he can do. So he's a better fit for me than the current guy I have on the roster in Will Levis.
615.
Well, that's
go
what
ahead,
we were. Jacoby Brissett has been a backup really his whole career.
Mm-hmm.
But there have been teams that have entered into a season with him as the starting quarterback just because he's a placeholder that's going to get you by until you find the right guy. So that might be what they find it. And Adam, quickly on your point about the Pickett reference, right? What's Pickett's value in a trade? Could that set some value for Levis? We don't know until you find out. So Brinker may be saying, hey, we haven't called anybody. We're not shopping him around. They probably should be behind. I mean, you say publicly whatever you want to say, but behind the scenes, they should be trying to get a gauge if there is any value, right? I don't know that there is value that would equal Pickett, but that's what you have to do your homework on and find out.
615-737-1025. Your thoughts on the future of Will Levis with the Tennessee Titans. 615-737-1025. Coming up next, some interesting comments from Diana Rossini of The Athletic on where the Titans stand with the number 1 overall pick. We'll play those for you and react to them as well. 615-737-1025. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 1025-1063. The Game. D-Mays, Finnegan, and Donick, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you. So as you all know, the NFL League meetings were earlier this week in Florida. Coaches ate breakfast, allegedly, talked to reporters. Everybody who is anybody was at these meetings. And I was listening to the Scoop City podcast starring Diana Rossini and Chase Daniel, former NFL quarterback, on The Athletic. And Diana Rossini was emptying her notebook, going through all of the things that she learned while on the ground at these meetings. Here is what Diana Rossini had to say about the Titans and the number 1 pick.
What would it take? What would
I
it
think
take,
it's
Diana,
good
for them to
business.
move off?
I think it's good business for them to keep this open. I think that's the point.
What would it take for them to
I
move
don't
off
know.
the pick?
I don't know. They won't answer that. They won't tell you.
It would have
So-
to be a ton.
Correct. I mean, this is an organization that is trying to completely revamp and rebuild. They are tearing it down. They did not have a good free agency last year. They don't have they have so many questions that need answers and a lot of positions to fill. So I understand the argument from some in the building that I know would like to trade out because they want to build. But they've lived
Here's
in
my
a
No, go
quarterback.
ahead.
They've lived in this quarterback situation where they don't have a lot of answers for a while. But I'd put it like this. I'm not sure if there's conviction yet. And that was my sense. I'm not feeling this conviction from Tennessee just yet. It seems, I mean, look, we saw Brian Callahan at the workout and it's lights out. Like he was so happy and loved what he loved what he saw. I'm just not feeling that yet. It's going to change. I'm just saying for right now.
A couple of things. First, I think it should be mandated that all NFL insiders do their podcasts outside where the birds are chirping. It added a nice little layer to it. I felt peaceful while listening to this.
Tranquil.
Yes, tranquil is a perfect word. It felt tranquil listening to Diana Rossini talk about the goings on inside the Titans organization. Well, cheep, 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 cheep. I like that. So I want everybody to do that from now on. Number 2, she did say the word convicted, which is a banned phrase on this show.
Conviction.
Okay. I thought convicted and conviction. They're related.
Yes.
They are related.
They are related, but she obviously didn't know we were going to play this on the show, so we'll let it go. But we're not allowed to say any of those words. But she was talking about, hey, there are people in the building who would like to trade out. I'm wondering who those people are. And one other thing that she said that wasn't in this clip, because I listened to it earlier. She was talking about Mike Borgonzi and how, hey, he's a first-time GM. He wants to make, he wants to make a splash. He wants to make an impression. He has the number 1 pick. I have to imagine as a first-time GM with that number 1 overall pick, that is your opportunity to make your mark on an organization. Now, at the same time, as we learned with John Robinson, you can also trade that number 1 pick and still make your mark on an organization as a first-time GM. So I do wonder which way Mike Borgonzi is leaning.
Yeah, and listen, you can go the John Robinson route, but I think that was a little bit different because they knew they were not taking a quarterback. Marcus was their guy, and then they went on and got Ryan Tannehill, I think the next following year or sometime during that year. But they were not thinking about us drafting, the Titans drafting a quarterback because they assumed that, okay, he's shown he's shown the ability to be developed. He had a really good season, I think the year prior, somewhere around there. So in their minds, let's surround him with more talent and let's go that route. But then they, come to find out he wasn't ultimately the guy. So they bring in Ryan Tannehill, and it worked out for John Robinson. I think what Borgonzi, from this standpoint, and when Diana Rossini says, well, there are some in the building that would draft that would move off that pick or want to move off that pick. Having that pick and wanting to move off that pick and keeping that pick is, I understand what she's saying, but did she ask them, well, if nobody's willing to, give you what you want, are you good with staying with the number one pick? If she would have, gave sort of, an answer to both of those, did that same person say that, hey, if you're not going to get what you want, then are you good with staying with the number one pick and drafting a quarterback? We only know what his answer was based upon her saying, hey, are you really sold on having that pick, or are you willing to move off of it? And they probably say, yeah, I move off this pick, but it has to be the right price. So to me, if you want to believe what Diana Russini's saying, I mean, go right ahead. I don't think she's completely wrong, because I think in this process, even though they've shown that they like Cam Ward, they still has shown that they are a little bit sort of in the middle with this, that if you offer me enough, I give it up. But if you don't, I don't mind taking the quarterback.
There's a saying that Lou Lamoriello in hockey, Elliot refers to it a lot. When you have time, use the time.
Mm-hmm.
We're still a ways away from the draft. And God, I wish it was tomorrow, because I am getting so tired
3 weeks
hearing-
from tomorrow.
hearing
3 weeks,
all of this noise. We're
Buckle up,
running in
Willie. It's only going to
circles.
get
It's the
louder between
same
now and
thing.
3 weeks from tomorrow.
It's the same old, same old. Tomorrow we'll have somebody else saying, hey, I'm not sure what the Titans are going to do. Hey, what do you think of Cam Ward? It's the same stuff, and we got to get through 3 more weeks. This is where my brain gets fried.
But it's going to
It's
ramp up, man. This is what you love.
But
The back and forth.
But you wait. You wait. You don't have to have the C word. You don't have to have everybody agreeing.
Uh-huh.
You can say whatever you want publicly. You wait and see what's the best offer, what's the best evaluation you can make, and then you make your decision. I would be disappointed if you had a series of reporters coming out and saying the Titans know exactly what they're going to do with the first pick, and let's just start printing the jerseys. It's going to be X. That's who they're picking. Because that's not utilizing the leverage you have when you have the first pick. I completely agree with the John Robinson. This is where you make your mark. He made a big decision, and it ended up working well for the Titans, and it got them moving in a direction that led to a run of good success.
But
Maybe
he
not the
made
highest
that
level of success, but it was a good move.
He made that decision under totally different circumstances that Bogdan
Right.
has to make it.
Because he had the quarterback.
Yeah, he had the quarterback, and he had just come off of a playoff. No, they didn't make the playoff that year.
No,
You're right.
They had the first pick.
Yeah, they have the first pick, so
They
they didn't
stunk.
make the playoff. Yeah, but
But they had the quarterback.
they had the quarterback.
They had the second pick
Yes.
the year before
Mhm.
and picked Mariota, and they had Lawan. They had a couple other pieces at some of the the linchpin positions that they weren't looking around for. And I think back then, 10 years ago or so, I think it was a little more in vogue that you jump up and get the first pick and you trade whatever you've got to do. I think teams are starting to be, at least the trend seems to be, you're a little less willing to jump in, especially after how badly it looked like the Panthers got burned 2 years ago. We traded what they traded to get Bryce Young, and you're like, ooh, where are they now? There's got to be a few other teams that are sitting there going, do we want to do that? Is that worth that? So I don't know if they're getting the calls, but it just takes the one. So if you have time, use it. Until then, we've got to hear all the noise and the this and that, and Diana Rossini and Adam Schefter and all that. We're just getting started, like you said, and we've already beaten it to death on the air.
By the way, at least Diana Rossini had birds, right? Adam Schefter
Well,
hasn't
that
had
did
birds.
make it more comforting.
Right? Didn't you feel more just more comforted?
Yes,
listening
that
to
helped me get through it. That helped me get through it. But I still wish the draft for tomorrow.
Well, let me
I
ask
still
you.
wish the draft for tomorrow.
Let me ask you about this, Willie. I brought this up yesterday on the show. I saw this tweet from Adam Schefter. Speaking of Adam Schefter, I saw this tweet a couple of weeks ago, and it still holds true. He wrote about 2-3 weeks ago, there have been no trades involving first-round picks in the 2025 NFL draft. This is the closest to the start of the NFL draft in which there have been no trades for first-round picks since 1993, when 5 days before that year's draft, the Chiefs traded a first-round pick to the 49ers for Joe Montana. So you touched on it a little bit there, But what do you make of the fact that this is the latest we've come, the closest we've come to the NFL draft, and we've yet to see a first round pick change
Well,
hands?
I've referred that article, and we've discussed it a lot about the Athletic, the study of
Yes.
the percentage chance that you succeed when you trade up. Your percentages of success are better over a long period of time by trading down and getting more picks. Maybe some people have gotten smart. It goes back to, are you willing to shut down the guy in the room saying, we got to have this guy. Let's trade. We got to get this guy. So we got to trade up, because the psychology is a part of it. And you have to have some willpower to maybe let your emotions go to the side and look at what history has shown. So maybe that's the trend, but you have time. It just takes one bite, right? It's like that fisherman that keeps that rod out and I am the worst fisherman ever, by the way. You don't want me trying to catch a fish for you. If dinner is depending on me catching a fish, you're screwed. You're going to be eating grass or whatever else that you can find. But I know my uncle's a great fisherman, but he's willing to sit out there, right? Be patient. He's got the skill. It just takes the one bite. And so I think that's what you have to do. You have to exhaust and wait. Continue. The evaluation is coming into picture. You keep doing that until the final minute. Use the time that you have. That stinks for me because I wish the draft was tomorrow because my brain is fried.
We will be there soon enough. But speaking of what the cost of the number 1 overall pick could be, Charles Robinson was on Robbie and Rexroad last week. And Robbie and Joe asked Charles about the Giants specifically and what it would take for the Titans to give up the number 1 overall pick to the Giants, who are at number 3. This is what Charles Robinson had to say.
What I think is really interesting is when you went back, and I addressed this when I wrote about Cam Ward's pro day a few weeks ago, if you talk to people in Cam Ward's circle, they felt pretty convinced that the Giants were going to make a run at the number 1 pick in the draft, that there was going to be, if not a trade that happened where the Giants moved up to 1, there was going to be a pretty significant effort that took place. And the feel I got was, pay attention to the NFL owners meetings, which obviously is coming up in the next week. That's where if there's traction on a trade, it's really going to hit the ground in the next week or so. So I didn't get the sense at all in any way, shape, or form that the Giants are out of potentially trading up, which would be, I don't see the Giants moving from 3 to 1 for anything less than 3 first-round picks or something of that nature, something of that value when you add up all the assets. And I don't see, if they stay put, I don't see them being out of the market for a quarterback.
That was Charles Robinson last week. So that was before the NFL meetings, which were earlier this week. But we talked about the Godfather offer you can't refuse type trade, 3 first-round picks or something of that value. Derek would certainly qualify.
Yeah, I think, but when you say that out loud to a team, if they're calling you, I think that team is going to hang up on you in a nice way. But I think that team is going to hang up.
How do you hang up on somebody in a nice way?
I don't know. Hey, listen, I got another call on the line. Hey, listen, I got another
Just
call
don't
on the
slam
line.
the phone.
Exactly.
I'm going to be hanging up now. Don't
Exactly.
be alarmed.
I got another call. I think it's somebody that want to make a deal. I will talk to you maybe later. Bye. That's how you do it nicely. But they listen. They know no one is going to give up 3 first-round picks, and if you do, then more power to you. But I don't think that's a smart move for an organization to do. You would have, that's almost like a surefire thing. When you give up 3 first-rounder, that's saying that guy that you're taking at the number 1 pick is going to change your franchise from the day he steps on the field for the next 10, 15 years. That's what giving up 3 first-round picks to me says. And is anybody in this year's draft worth that? I'm not sure there is. Whether it be Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter, me giving up 3 first-round picks to get that, no, you're not worth it, especially outside of the quarterback position. So, listen, whatever the Titans choose to do, I think they believe in their minds it's going to be the right thing for the organization.
615-737-1025. Speaking of the New York Giants, Mike Borgonzi had coffee with who? We'll discuss that next. 615-737-1025. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Bingen, 1025-1063. The Game.
All right, let's talk Lee Company for a moment here. I'm in Dallas, and of course, day off. It's raining. Well, actually, it stopped a little bit. Maybe there's hope for the afternoon, but it's been a little disappointing. Some of the weather we've had on these off days. But the Predators are back in action against the Dallas Stars tomorrow night, and it's brought to you in part by Lee Company. And Lee Company, of course, sponsors our radio coverage on 1025 The Game. Lee Company has been in business since 1944. What do they do? Well, they help you keep your house or your business in order with general maintenance and also the things that really are important that you have to stay on top of. They'll do the work for you. And that is your heating, your cooling, your plumbing, and electric. It is the season where you want to make sure your air conditioning is running properly. If you haven't had it checked in a while, that's okay. You're not alone. But it's great to stay on top of it rather than wait until the middle of the summer. And if it goes out on you, now you're in a crisis. They can help you there too, but stay in front of it. Get it checked and find out what they can do to keep your house running efficiently and avoid the crisis that can really have you hung up when it's really, really hot or really, really cold. Just call 615-567-1000 or go to leecompany.com. That's 615-567-1000 or leecompany.com. Lee Company, proud sponsor, Nashville Predators.
D Mace Fingan and Donick 1025, 1063 The Game. DVD is proudly presented by Bet365. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. So, with all of the power players in the NFL in one hotel earlier this week, I came across this tweet from Pat Leonard, an old friend of mine. Pat Leonard from the New York Daily News used to cover Rangers Capitals playoff series with Pat Leonard back in the day. He now covers the New York Giants for the Daily News up in New York. He tweeted this: Giants GM Joe Shane and Titans GM Mike Borgonzi were just out in the open here at the Breakers Hotel alone, having coffee and chatting for a bit. Titans are picking number 1 in the NFL draft. Giants are picking number 3. When I first saw this tweet, are either of you familiar with the show Gossip Girl?
Yeah, I'm familiar with it. Yes.
I know of it.
Did your daughter watch it perhaps? I think she was in the age range of when Gossip Girl would have been very popular.
I do not know that to be the case one way or the other.
Either way,
She's never mentioned it to me.
Either way, I was just thinking, spotted Joe S. and Mike B. having coffee at the Breakers Hotel. XOXO Gossip Girl. But I always find these
I was
interactions
really into Gossip Girl still.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh man. Well, that's okay.
I threw them all. But it took me years to sort of. I was watching reruns basically before I got. That's when I got into it.
You know who I think is totally into Gossip Girl? Chris Sanders. Chris Sanders
definitely.
screams Gossip Girl
Definitely.
when he's not watching The Golden Bachelorette.
For sure. That's his top show.
He is watching Gossip Girl.
Yes.
But I always find these interactions fascinating.
Actually, his top show is Judge Judy. So
Okay.
We'll give him that one.
he thinks she's hot.
What? Is that
Yes.
true?
Hey.
Hey, Chris, go for it, man.
Judge Judy, man. Hey, Judge
I mean,
Judy,
her
looking
show
lady.
used to be called Hot Bench. So I mean,
I think Caroline Fenton used to say something on this program that I actually didn't like. Not that I didn't. I thought the saying always kind of gives me the heebie-jeebies. Don't yuck somebody else's yum. She used to say that all the
Hey,
time.
it's true.
And I'm
It's
just
true.
like, can we think of another way to say that? I don't care for that. Either way, it's always interesting when you have these spotted Mike Borgonzi and Joe Shane talking and having coffee at the hotel that they're both staying at. The NHL, as Willie knows, although it's not going to happen this year because the NHL draft is being decentralized, it's going to be more like the NFL draft where all the GMs and scouts stay back at their team headquarters. And unlike usual NHL drafts where all of the teams would be on the draft floor and they would have tables next to each other. And you would be like, is Barry Trotz talking to Lou Lamoriello? Are the Predators and Islanders about to make a trade? But it's just like them catching up, right? Yeah. But you see that. So, but the Giants and the Titans, there have been plenty of rumor and innuendo about what the Giants could do. I heard Dan Graziano on ESPN say the other day that the signings of Jameis Winston and Russell Wilson won't prevent the Giants from taking a quarterback. Now, that quarterback could end up being Shedeur Sanders, who could be there at number 3. But, Willie, the Giants are a fascinating team to me because they signed those 2 veteran players. They signed Jameis Winston, I believe, to a 2-year deal, clearly backup money for Jameis Winston. They signed Russell Wilson, I think, to a 1-year deal, if I'm not mistaken. So you would assume that they don't need a quarterback. But I wouldn't completely rule them out of drafting a quarterback.
No, that's the game. That's the game we're playing. As far as the Gossip Girl, they were spotted. That's what should happen, whether it's together in live or back channels, texting. Or phone conversations, whether cordless or not, with the old school. At the end of the day, they're going to have a lot of conversations. So it's another non-story. Because you see people talking doesn't mean they're going to make a deal, but it's inevitable that they're going to feel each other out for what's going on. And I think the Titans should have that same type of conversation multiple times with all the teams and gauge what's the best use of that first pick. That's what it comes down to. It's boring for me to say it. It's much more fun for the gossip girl trying to read into it. My favorite story that you talked about, I've said it many times, but as far as the NHL on the draft, right, when the TV coverage is on and somebody's on the clock and nobody can think of anything to say and they see a GM on the phone. There was one time that David Poile was on the phone and they were saying he could be moving the pick. And he was actually on our radio show for our draft coverage. He was talking to us on the radio. So on the TV, it's blaring out, David Poile's on the phone. On the air, we were listening to David Poile because he was talking to us. We were asking him questions about the draft. So it was it's all fun and games. It's all showmanship.
I mean, you can go one way or the other. It just all depends on how you want to cover, the topic at that particular time. You can look at it as, oh my, Borgonzi was sitting at the table with the GM from the Giants. Oh, they could be striking up a deal. Oh my goodness, what is going on? The Giants are looking to move up for, to get that number 1 pick from the Titans. Will somebody else come to the table? Or you can look at it as, oh, okay, he saw him and he said, hey, is somebody sitting here? He didn't want to go to the other tables. It was closest to where he was getting his food and just sat down. And they know each other. And they sparked up a conversation about something outside of the draft, maybe about, one of the rule changes or potential rule changes or the tush push or, hey, man, hey, I saw that, your daughter had a birthday, stuff like that. It can be just that. But as we know, listen, you're not looking for that angle, especially this time of year. That's not the angle you're looking for. Borgonzi asking about his daughter's recital. No, that's not what you're looking for. You're looking for the other angle.
We want the drama.
Yes. Oh my goodness, they're making a deal. The Giants really do want to move up. Okay,
Maybe.
if that's the narrative you want to go with, I get it.
I mean, maybe, right? We
Yeah.
don't know. It's fun.
Exactly.
It's like, this is the game. It's
And
the
then they end
espionage.
up making a deal with the San Francisco 49ers. And they never did sit at the table with the 49ers to eat breakfast or lack thereof breakfast, because Adam don't think they eat breakfast.
Well, it's called an AFC coach's breakfast, and I never saw them eating breakfast. Now, Teron Davenport alleges that they eat breakfast beforehand, but I would like to see them at a table breaking bread together.
They're actually eating and talking.
Right.
But-
Brian Callahan cutting into his French toast, pouring the maple syrup over it, while Paul Kaharski spits eggs at him while he's asking his probing questions.
That's not a good sight. That's not a good. But I mean, listen, this is the time of year. Listen, everything will be turned up an extra notch as we continue to go along the process. So, it's sort of ironic this year, which it is every year, that the coaches meeting sort of happens. Owners meeting happens now. It happens every year around this time. But, each time this moment comes up and there is still, that sort of, I don't know who I'm going to take at number 1 or number 2. And there's still this back and forth. When you have owners meetings like this, stuff like this comes up. Well, I saw the Giants in the elevator with the San Francisco 49ers. Are they making a deal? I saw the Titans sitting with, the GM from the Cleveland Browns, or I saw the Cleveland Browns sitting with the GM from the New Orleans Saints. Are the New Orleans Saints looking to move up to try to get Shedeur Sanders? I mean, those stories are going to happen, and I think they know it. I mean, those coaches know it. They know when they sit next to certain people and there are cameras there, what may come up out of that, especially if they're sitting there and they're talking for a while. And again, they could be talking about nothing related to football. But if I see that, then all of a sudden I'm thinking, oh, they could be talking about making a deal. And as we get closer to the draft, stuff like that will continue to be turned up.
If I recall correct,
I think it's probably not their first conversation, right?
No.
I think it's safe to say that there's probably been a series of conversations before they ever sat down for coffee.
Yeah.
Which makes it possible that what you're saying either way is plausible, that
That's
they've
the
already
word,
discussed
plausible.
it, and they may not even need to talk about. They already know where they stand on the situation with the first pick as of today. And so, hey, who's your favorite baseball team? What's your favorite movie? Are you watching Gossip Girl? Have you ever watched Gossip Girl? Do you spit eggs when you eat breakfast? All things that are just normal, casual conversation, because they've already done the business at least to this point. So there's no way of knowing it.
Mike Borgonzi does not strike me as a Gossip Girl fan.
Nah, it's more so of he probably was a
He likes The Shield. Remember the show The Shield on
Yeah.
FX? He seems like a guy who would like The Shield.
yeah, Borgonzi's what, 30 something, 40?
I'm not sure how old he is.
Because I pegged him as a Laverne and Shirley type of person too, but yeah, I mean he may be
He's probably got to be a little older than 40 to
he
appreciate
may be a
Laverne
little
and
bit
Shirley.
too young for that one. So, but hey, listen, this time of year, the best part about this time of year.
What's
This is
that?
the best part. Nobody's right and nobody's wrong.
Yet.
Right.
Yeah,
You can say
exactly.
literally anything you want.
Absolutely. If it's in the ballpark, I may disagree with you, but I'm not going to say you're completely wrong because it's still in the ballpark and it could potentially happen. Why? Because it hadn't happened yet.
And I know that we rely a lot on these insiders for our
Yes.
shows. We rely on the reporting of Teron Davenport and Paul Kaharski and Adam Schefter and Diana Rossini and Ian Rappaport, and the list goes on and on. But, an Adam Schefter report is the Titans possibly could think about trading the number 1 pick. Okay, I've learned a lot by hearing that. They could possibly consider maybe doing something with the number 1 pick or not. Back to you in the studio. Like, that's just the nature of the game. As Avon Barksdale said on The Wire, another great show.
Yeah,
game-
but
the
okay,
game is
but
the game.
let's take that though, because
game is the
last
game.
week, right? That's a great show, by the way. I am big into The Wire. That would
too.
be worth bringing up at coffee. Have you watched The Wire? But we were sitting here. Was it a week ago, 2 weeks ago? All signs point to them picking Cam Ward.
Mhm.
Like that was said, right? Hey, it looks like they're going to take Cam Ward. They're trying. I think there is probably a game that you play to make sure that perception doesn't stick there. You want to create mystery, right? So you have to actually do stuff, and you use people like Rossini or Schefter to put out reports. Well, they're not sure. They're open to everything. They might even be quoted. We're open to everything, just so it doesn't look like you know exactly what they're going to do.
Yeah, because not too many teams are going to, unless it's just a draft where you have Trevor Lawrence or, Caleb Williams, possibly even Joe Burrow, because even, you go back to further drafts, it's like there was always that second person. So unless you have like I'm drafting this guy no matter what y'all say. This is my guy. Y'all don't even call me because I'm drafting that guy. And we've seen that a handful of times with the quarterback position. But outside of that, don't you want to keep it sort of, in that sort of realm of ambiguity where it's like you don't know quite what I'm doing? Isn't that what you want? Because you've talked about that a lot, Willie. It's like with the number 1 pick, if you know for sure that this is not a situation where it's a Trevor Lawrence or one of those guys that everybody knew he was going to be the first pick. So don't even call me. Don't you want to leave that sort of, yeah, I can take him. Yeah, I can trade out of it, whichever one, because I think both ways I'm going to end up where I want to be anyway.
Totally. And the problem is that Ward is too much of a mixed bag.
Mhm.
And the other guys even who are reportedly at the top of most of the mock drafts, I don't think so many teams are desperate to get that first pick and will give you anything to do it. And the Titans may not be sold that any of those guys are truly worthy of the culture-changing, culture-driving type of player that you hope is there for the first pick. That's what makes this tricky.
615-737-1025 will take your thoughts on Mike Borgonzi and Joe Shane's coffee date at the Breakers Hotel in Florida. I wonder what kind of coffee they had Mike Borgonzi does seem like a straight black coffee kind of guy. I don't see Mike Borgonzi drinking one of those fancy drinks with the whipped cream and the sprinkles and the chocolate sauce. That doesn't seem like his type of beverage. 615-737-1025. Before, we'll be back, but before we go, I do want to give a shout out to another radio program. Yesterday we were talking about April Fool's Day. I have to give some flowers to another radio program for what they did on April Fool's Day. We'll discuss that next. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 1025, 1063, The Game. D Mace Finken and Donick 1025, 1063 the game. Stillman and Company coming up next, of course. Jared is also in the building. It's picture day around here. We all have to get some new glamour photos. Willie Donick will have to do it once he returns from the road. Derek and I stepped out earlier to get our photos done. Who knows how good they are? We'll see. I've never been described as photogenic.
Oh, mine's great. I know that.
well,
already.
yeah, but
I didn't break the camera, so that's all I'm glad about.
That's good. That's good.
Can you really break the camera?
No,
you
no,
can't
no,
really break the camera.
It's just a joke because
I know.
if someone's ugly, they break the camera.
I wouldn't say. I mean, man, you're
No,
nice.
no.
You're okay to
I'm
the
just,
crowd, man. Don't
I'm
sell
just,
yourself. Don't show yourself.
It's a joke.
Don't sell yourself short. Excuse me.
It is funny how that saying.
Uh-huh.
That's one of those sayings where you wonder who invented that. Did somebody actually feel like they broke a camera? They're like,
Have someone
I
ever
broke the
broken a camera because of the way they look?
so why
The
so why
camera
did
was
they
like,
think that was a funny?
damn.
Why did they think that was a funny saying? I don't know. Like, but it stuck. Like, cause that's for decades. People say,
Yeah.
I might break the camera.
Yeah.
I don't want to break your camera.
Yeah, there you go.
So yesterday, Willie, we were talking about April Fool's Day because yesterday was indeed April Fool's Day. And we were talking about like what's appropriate as an April Fool's joke. And I want to give a shout out. Speaking of Columbus, the Predators were in Columbus yesterday. I want to give a shout out to the Common Man and T-Bone show on Columbus, Ohio's 97.1 The Fan. Talk about a great name for a sports talk radio show. Common Man and T-Bone. But I want to give a shout out to Common Man and T-Bone for their April Fool's joke. This was from Awful Announcing. Regular listeners of Common Man and T-Bone may have noticed some similarities between Monday's show and Tuesday's episode, the latter of which happened to fall on April 1st. In fact, the afternoon drive time show proceeded to address the exact same topics on Tuesday that it already had on Monday, even going so far as to interview the Athletic's Jason Stark in back-to-back days. The show's hosts even happened to be wearing the exact same clothes for Monday's and Tuesday's episodes. The story goes on to say that the YouTube feed, the live YouTube feed of Tuesday's show, filled with listeners wondering whether they had accidentally re-aired Monday's episode.
Awesome.
So they just redid all of Monday's show on Tuesday. They wore the same clothes.
Uh-huh.
They talked about the same things in the same order. They interviewed the same guests. That's a commitment to the bit
Yes.
that I have to give them kudos for.
That's a
And
script
they got
right
Jason
there.
Stark to do an interview for a second day in a row. That's
It
great.
sounds like it.
And answer the same questions, I guess.
You know, I got a text message yesterday. Yesterday was the second, right? Yeah.
Today's the
Today
second.
is
Yesterday is the
No, I
first.
got it today.
Okay.
And it was a text asking if I can do an interview, but I think they got the wrong Derek Mason because they were like, Coach, would love to have you on the show. Y'all. I was thinking if this happened yesterday, I would have been like, yeah, I'll do the show, but I need to do it within the next, such. And I may have done the show as Coach Derek Mason of MTSU. I was thinking like, man, if that would have happened yesterday, I probably would have done the interview as Coach Derek Mason and then said
Right.
April Fool's at the end.
Do you
This is
remember
the wrong
this?
Derek Mason.
Do you remember this
Exactly.
story? This
That happened to me before. You know that, Willie.
Oh, absolutely. I know it's happened many times.
Yeah.
Speaking of, and this has to do with, this is Tennessee Titans adjacent. This is from A to Z Sports. Headline, June 6, 2024. Reporter thinks she's interviewing Vince Young playing golf in hilariously awkward mistake.
Oh,
Do you remember
we did
this?
talk about this. Yes. And the guy was really nice. It was live, right? It was a live interview.
It was live.
And the guy was very nice and was not rude about it and basically explained, yes, I'm not the Vince Young you think that you're talking to right now. That was awkward. Wow.
I don't think
but
I
it
don't think
happened
the
at the-
gentleman's name was even Vince Young.
Oh man, that's even worse.
It was Everett Sands.
Oh hell, that's so far from Vince Young.
The worst part was he didn't look nothing like Vince Young.
So who told that man that was Vince Young?
Oh, I don't know.
Whoever was on her
Oh,
ear was
man.
just,
Willie, do you have you've been in the broadcasting game a long time. Do you have any similarly awkward broadcasting moments like that?
Oh, yeah. Well, maybe not that extent, but I did. One of my biggest gaffes of all time was we interviewed a great, I wouldn't say legendary, but a great head coach back in the day, Dan Reeves. You remember he coached John Elway's Broncos teams most famously, right? And then he became the coach of the Falcons and got them to the Super Bowl. And we got him on the show. I used to be the producer back in the day, and I would schedule the guests. And I got Dan Reeves. I got all excited. I told George and Joe Biddle, the late Joe Biddle. I was like, guys, we got Dan Reeves coming on. They're like, oh, all right, good job. Hey, all right. And I got him on, and I asked him about his new quarterback, Elvis Grbac. They didn't sign Elvis Grbac. They signed Chris Chandler. And so the look I got from George and Joe, I will never forget. I was ready to just crawl into a hole because this is live radio.
How did you get out of it?
I didn't. Because Dan Reeves, was a pro, but he was like, well, we don't have Elvis Grbac. The guy you're thinking of is Chris Chandler. And then he just started talking about Chris Chandler. Of course, they got the Super Bowl with Chris Chandler.
Yeah, they did.
But in my mind, I got some wires crossed. But I was so excited to talk to Dan Reeves about his new quarterback, and whoops.
Wrong
guy.
quarterback. Absolutely. That happened to me, and it happened to me here. Willie,
So
and I
apparently,
was in
Jared
the,
just told me that the pick that Dan Reeves made for Chris Chandler was for you.
Yeah, that was the Houston Oilers traded away, and they
Also,
got the 4th round pick.
Big Joe texted me. He said that they got Everett Sands the next day after that happened on Chase and Big Joe, and they were just laughing about it the entire time.
So it does happen to just about everybody. I mean, you're in this thing long enough, because at the SEC Media Day last year, was it 2 years ago, Willie, when they had it here?
2 years ago.
2 years ago, and we had our show down there with Caroline, but it was a station asking for me from another radio station. I think it was from an Alabama radio station or something. And so I went over there, and they started asking me these questions, and I could have went with it, but I chose not to. And I'm like, you have the wrong Derek Mason. I could have went out there and proclaimed that we were going to beat Alabama. We were going to do this. We were going to do that. But I didn't. Dang it, I would have been a great opportunity to do that too. Gosh.
It's a little different when you are a print reporter like I've been for most of my career, because if you make those mistakes, nobody ever has to hear or read about it because you just don't transcribe the interview.
Ryan Rosilio had the wrong Brandon Marshall like a few years ago. He talked about how he was interviewing the wrong Brandon Marshall on a live podcast. At least it was a podcast, but not like an interview.
Well,
but still.
Sometimes you just have to go.
It's not a good feeling.
No, absolutely not.
That wrong question, asking about that wrong player when he no longer is on your roster, or you don't have that is I think I've done that once. I brought up a guy and quickly was like, oh, he's not on that team. It's like, gosh.
But that'll do it for us today. We hope you all had a wonderful time with us, and you will have a wonderful time with Jared Stillman coming up at 2:00. For Derek Mason and Willie Big D Donick, I'm Adam Pinkin, 102.5, 106.
Lock in for Big D tomorrow, guys.
Be love on your people and those that are around you. Be safe, be happy, have a blessed and wonderful Wednesday. Peace.